Sani Bonani, Ninjani, Nagingu Naveen Bhasin, Nagivila India, Nagiai Thanda, Ningizimu Africa. So let's welcome our guest, His Excellency, High Commissioner of South Africa to India, Nepal and Bangladesh, Professor Anil Suklal. Welcome, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, sir. So it's our profound honor that, sir, you accepted our request and you are here with us on the podcast with Naveen Bhasin.
My pleasure.
Sir, you are multi-talented, multifaceted personality. We have gone through your experience. I think this is the time that we can learn a lot of things from you, sir.
Thanks.
So please tell us about your journey from a student to a High Commissioner, sir.
Well, it's been an interesting journey, if I can say so myself, in that as a student, of course, I was very keen and interested in the world as a whole. And I think the circumstances of South Africa forced you to look at the wider world because of the unique situation that we found ourselves in South Africa under an apartheid government. I was born and raised under the apartheid regime, which basically legislated discrimination on the basis of race. And that led to a very divided, stratified South African society, where the fundamental human rights and freedoms of the majority community was denied, and the minority white community took it upon themselves to determine what was in the best interest of the majority through legislation. So apartheid in 1948, when the then National Party came to power, legislated racial discrimination. And it was very unfortunate because it was not just about the discrimination, but it was the manner in which the majority were treated as third-class citizens and denied basic human rights. So, of course, this led to the majority community organizing themselves and into different political formations as the liberation movement, as we referred to them in South Africa of that period. And interestingly, it has a history with India, because as you are aware, Mahatma Gandhi spent 21 years from 1893 to 1914 in South Africa. And he was also brutally exposed to the South African environment and the inhumane treatment of the majority, including the Indian South Africans that had gone there as indentured laborers, and some went as traders. And Gandhi, of course, was responsible for organizing the first political party in South Africa. He arrived in 1893, and in 1894 he was instrumental in launching the Natal Indian Congress, which was to play an important role in conscientizing South Africans in terms of their rights and opposing the unjust laws of apartheid. So the impact of Gandhi was to be felt throughout South Africa's liberation struggle. In fact, Nelson Mandela, who was at the forefront of our struggle, has credited Gandhi for being an important factor in his life. So you can see that the history of South Africa was a very painful past that all of us experienced, and I was brought up in that environment. At a very young age, I became politicized. While still at school, we recognized that we have to stand up against this unjust system. And of course, our neighbors were also under rule that discriminated against the majority, what was then Lorenzo Mark, which is now Mozambique. They were fighting for their freedom. Southwest Africa, which is now called Namibia, was also fighting for their freedom. So was Angola. So you were brought up in an environment not just exposed to the inhumane treatment that we as South Africans underwent from our government of the day, but our neighbors as well. As I've indicated, Zimbabwe included, all of our neighbors were subject to the same kind of discrimination, racial discrimination, the majority being ruled by minorities. So this was naturally going to impact on you. When I entered university, of course, politics was very much part of our university life. Taking part in agitation, demonstrations, opposing the apartheid regime. This was an integral part of our life. My studies, of course, I was very keen from a very young age on the Asian continent. It held a fascination for me, and therefore I started studying Oriental history and a subject called Science of Religion, which basically was a study of world religions, including religions emanating from the Indian subcontinent, Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism. This was all part of my studies, as was the other major religions of the world, is Islam, Christianity, Judaism, and of course traditional African religion being part of the South African environment. So I had this deep interest in religion, philosophy, history, and I went on to major in Oriental history and religious studies. And upon completing my postgraduate studies, I was offered a lecturing post at the University of South Africa, which is headquartered in Pretoria. It's the largest correspondence university at that stage in the world. Even today, it has like over 150,000 students. But the campus was located in Pretoria, so I had to translocate from my hometown, Durban. And I was the first person of Indian origin to be appointed onto the academic staff of that university. As you know, universities, like all facets of life, were arranged along the racial lines. So you had universities specifically for the white community, the so-called colored community, and the African community. And the university where I studied was specifically created for people of Indian origin, Indian South Africans. We had to study. We didn't have the freedom of being able to choose our universities. We had to study at the universities designated for us. Even schooling, we had to attend the schools meant for Indian students. So you can see that from a very young age, life was arranged around a almost unnatural environment. Everything was based on race. Of course, becoming an academic was one of my dreams in life, and I lectured at the University of South Africa in the Faculty of Theology. Not only was I the first person of Indian origin, but I was the first person that was not of the Christian faith in the Faculty of Theology, because the university was keen to have someone from the background of Indian religion. So I lectured on Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism, Indian religions as they called it. And of course, during my time at the University of South Africa, I already was very active in terms of our political struggle as someone who my inspiration was drawn by and large, influenced by my own personal philosophy and background. My exposure to the Bhagavad Gita, when I read it, had a profound impact on not just my life, but in terms of my attitude with regard to the political situation I found myself in. And for me, South Africa was Kurukshetra. It was a battlefield. And the Pandavas were really the majority community fighting for dharma and justice. And the Kauravas were the apartheid regime, an unjust regime that needed to be opposed and removed based on the policies that they adhered to. So the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita and the philosophy imparted by Sri Krishna to Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra was in many ways symbolic of the environment I found myself in South Africa. And that impacted deeply in terms of how I related to the liberation struggle and my involvement therein. But at the same time, I think in my exposure, not only to my own faith and the other religions coming from the Indian subcontinent, but my study of the other religions of the world, it dawned on me that all of them have the same goal, that we all belong to one human family, and it doesn't matter in what name and form we worship the divine. It is ultimately the one divine form or supreme being, however we want to describe it, that we all, every faith, as Sri Ramakrishna said, all rivers lead to the same ocean. And the world is one ocean with different complexities and different ethnicities, races, nations and cultures. And of course, the religious community also, like other communities, were very active in opposing apartheid. And it was during my time at the University of South Africa that Archbishop Desmond Tutu called a meeting of a few of us from different faiths to create the first interfaith organization in South Africa in order to oppose apartheid as a collective. Previously, each community was doing it by themselves, and he felt that coming together as the faith community, we will be far more powerful in terms of our agitation against the regime. So in 1984, Archbishop Tutu convened us and we created an organization called the World Conference on Religion and Peace, the South African chapter. And I was a founding member of that and served as national secretary. And that organization played a very important role in terms of agitating against the apartheid regime. Another very important figure was Desmond Tutu, and then also Alan Busak from the Christian faith. You had very important Jewish, Muslim leaders. I was there from the Hindu community with a few others, the traditional African religious community. So it was a powerful coming together. And we received a lot of support from the International World Conference on Religion and Peace. The World Council of Churches was very supportive in terms of our activities. And that also exposed me traveling to meetings, especially to Geneva, my first exposure to the World Council of Churches, several times where we had meetings there. And also it brought me into direct contact with the leaders of our liberation struggle. In 1987, I, together with other members of the organization, we traveled to Lusaka, where the African National Congress, some of the leaders were in exile. We had a meeting with them in order to coordinate our activities against the apartheid regime. So yes, academia also brought me closer to many of the leaders of the struggle and provided new opportunities in terms of meeting other figures around the world and also getting support for our liberation struggle. I then was offered a lecturing post at what was then the University of Durban Westville, which is now University of KwaZulu-Natal, where I went and was a lecturer and continued my work within the community. We created a chapter of the World Conference on Religion and Peace in our province, and I served as chairperson of that, and also played an important role in conscientizing and bringing members of the Hindu community together in order to have a collective response against an unjust regime, as the Christian leaders did to rally support from within the Christian community, so did the Muslims and the Jews. And I felt it was very important that the Hindu voice is also heard, because we are a sizable community in South Africa, and we also, as I've said, come from a faith that believes in humanity being one family and the sacredness of all life, not just human life. And what we saw under the apartheid regime, where our leaders were incarcerated, arrested, President Mandela and Walter Sisulu, Ahmed Katara, many others, Sats Cooper, were sent to Robben Island. Mandela 27 years in prison. And of course, those of us that were outside, it was our responsibility to keep alive their dream and their spirit, even though they were incarcerated. The voices were muffled, but we knew exactly why they were suffering. It was for our freedom and for the freedom of the country. So I spent 11 years in total as an academic, and my involvement with the freedom struggle, my contact with the African National Congress. When we became a democracy in 1994, I was fortunate that even before that, as you know, South Africa was suspended from the United Nations in 1970 because of international agitation, and India played a major role in bringing to the global community the plight of South Africans. So when President Mandela was released from prison in February 1990, and all of the political parties were unbanned and all political prisoners were released, and we started negotiations towards a democratic regime. And the rest of the world also started then embracing South Africa and assisting us in this road towards democracy. And the United Nations, in preparation for our readmittance, invited a group of South Africans on an orientation program to the United Nations headquarters in Geneva. I was fortunate to be one of a group of about 30 of us. It was a multi-party delegation from all political parties, including from non-governmental organizations. So I was nominated to be one of those. So it was my first exposure in 1992 to the United Nations, where we spent 3 weeks on an orientation program. But the United Nations as an organization fascinated me. And I went back in 1993 on a fellowship program. I received a fellowship in human rights. So I spent a month on the fellowship program at the Center for Human Rights in Geneva, and a week in Strasbourg as part of the cause, exposure to the European Court of Justice. And I received a certificate for completing that cause. But while I was there, I also came in contact with some of the colleagues at the Center for Human Rights, and they encouraged me to come back and do an internship. So in 94, I went back for 3 months and did an internship on human rights. And I was given the responsibility for preparing the last UN delegation coming to South Africa, the delegation that was formed by the United Nations to address the question of apartheid in South Africa and to close that chapter. So it was for me a very satisfying moment to have that opportunity to prepare for their final assignment to South Africa. And it was while I was at the Center for Human Rights that I was approached by the African National Congress to come and join government. Because as you know, under the apartheid regime, the foreign ministry was by and large reserved for white South Africans, those that would propagate the apartheid viewpoint and philosophy, if one can call it that. So at the end of '94, I left my post as academic, and January '95 I joined the government of South Africa, what was then called the Department of Foreign Affairs. So I've had a long 3-decade journey as a diplomat now, but I've maintained my relationship with academia because academia is still very close to my heart. And over the years, I've continued giving lectures, visiting universities, wherever I traveled as a diplomat, wherever I was posted, I always maintained that. I always continued writing and researching, which has, as an academic, was an integral part of my life. But already, even before joining government as an academic, I was widely published. Both my master's and PhD were published as monographs, and I founded the journal of the Department of Hindu Studies at the University of Durban, Westville, called Nidan, and served as editor. And that journal today is well established. It still continues to be published by the University of KwaZulu-Natal. And I was associated with several other journals, even currently as on the advisory board. So academia still is very much part of my life. I am extraordinary professor at Northwest University in South Africa, honorary professor at Gurmilov University, Asian University in Kazakhstan. I've given lectures at many universities in India. In fact, I think every continent I've done that and continue to do so even at the present time, and continue writing and publishing as well.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. It's an honor to learn more about you, your journey. I think people who are watching this podcast, they will make a way to join the Indian Foreign Services, as you have got a very good experience with Desmond Tutu, who got the Nobel Prize in 1984.
Yes.
And recently, sir, you invited Dr. Shashi Tharoor to give a lecture on Desmond Tutu International Peace Lecture in Cape Town. So how was your experience with Dr. Shashi Tharoor?